Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It's just me, Brandon, here this time. Gamby is packing as he's leaving for LA, a long drive from New York coming up this week. So I'm giving him the day off, but he did write his notes out, and I'm going to give his takes, as trashy as they are, along with my own. Let's go ahead and start off with Grammar School. The first one, of course, I was worried about this name, but it was the first name I thought I was going to butcher. I hadn't heard it enough, and it was the last name that I gave and also messed up. So it is Jujhar Khaira, apparently. That is a player on Edmonton that I recommended as a short-term ad for super deep leagues this weekend. Jujhar Khaira. I won't get that wrong again, hopefully. And then another thing that we just as a kind of team need to get used to, and I honestly, I think this is more of a problem with just the United States in general, is the less versus fewer concept. I mean, when you go to the grocery store, you see 10 items or less lines. It should be 10 items or fewer. I feel like these types of things just ingrain it in our heads that less is fine in all contexts. But I understand that when it's something you can count, it should be fewer when you're talking about there being fewer points, for example. We'll try. No guarantees that this won't show up repeatedly on Grammar School, though. Okay, let's move into the week review, and I'll start with Gamby's takes. His first one is that Colorado is now fully healthy. That's obviously a great sign for Colorado, as they've lost everybody that they needed for a long time. Fully healthy is it's not quite there because Kadri is out. They have a few other like place guys like Colin Wilson, Eric Johnson, and Kamenev that are also injured. But their top line, what should be their top line, is all healthy with Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon. Although, as we know, Donskoy has still been taking that top left wing spot for the time being. Personally, I don't think that's going to stick. It could, I guess. But I really do think that Landeskog will move back up sooner than later. And when Kadri comes back, I expect that Donskoy will get bumped from the first power play unit. But none of this may happen immediately with how well Donskoy has been playing lately. And then the other take that Gamby had, which I actually think is amazing, I balked. I did not think this was true, is Sami Vatanen is the only New Jersey Devil defenseman with a point on the power play this season. The only Devils defenseman. No Severson, no Butcher, no Subban. It's only Vatanen. And he really only he's only had that top power play slot for a little bit. I mean, he spent some time injured. It was Subban's show for a long time. Butcher and Severson have shown up there. And then Vatanen, 6 power play points already. The guy is very low ownership. I don't really understand what's going on here. Sneak preview, he's going to show up on long-term targets. So, or rather, he should. Okay. My takes. Are we all right with Price now? I think there was that short window of everybody kind of losing their mind about Carey Price, and he's starting to play well again. I think we can all relax. Carey Price is still a good goalie. I don't think we're going to see a repeat of him a few years ago where he just totally fell apart for the entire season. It doesn't seem like something that's going to happen to me, and I think he's back on track. I think we can feel all right about him. The other thing that's actually worrying to me is Miro. Well, not worrying because I'm not that big of a Klingberg owner, but Miro Heiskanen has taken over power play 1, which they have stacked back up with what you'd expect from that power play, which is, well, Radulov when he's not being benched or scratched or whatever. Sagan, Pavelski, and Ben. That is definitely a concern. I thought for sure that even like last year, there was this talk about whether Heiskanen would take over Klingberg, and it was just a non-starter for me. I thought there's no way that would be the case. Actually, it looks like Radulov was bumped off that unit because, of course, I guess Montgomery just hates him, which I can't blame him necessarily. He's been taking some bad penalties lately, but so it's Hintz that's been up there. But anyway, it's definitely concerning. I'm not going to overreact yet. I still think Klingberg is worth hanging on to. He's still got top pairing, and they are splitting up so far that power play a little bit, like 60-40 as opposed to like something like 70-30. And I do think that if Heiskanen struggles, it's more likely that Klingberg will take over his spot and keep it than it is that if Klingberg were to struggle, that Heiskanen would reverse it if Klingberg does take it back over. If that makes any sense. Basically, if Klingberg gets that top power play line back, I think it's going to be harder to move him off of it than it would be for Heiskanen. And then the last bit, we had John Hines get fired, replaced with Alain Nasreddine. Boy, I hope I said that right. And then, yeah, they still are the Devils. It turns out. Who knew? They lost the first game with him at the head, and then they lost again. So it hasn't been great. But, I mean, there's not a whole lot to work with on that team anyway. So I think there's a lot of overhyping with what was going to go on with the Devils with the emergence of Jack Hughes, Nikita Gusev, and the acquisition of PK Subban, who just hasn't helped enough. So, yeah, we've got a new coach over there, but I don't know how much that's going to make a difference long term. And Hall is still almost certainly on his way out. All right, moving into the injury report. There's a handful here. Starting off, we have Andrew Shaw. There's a weird amount of concussions this season, I feel like. Although I do feel like I say this once a season, but here it is this time. Andrew Shaw is out day-to-day with a concussion. We've also got Jesperi Kotkaniemi out with a concussion. If you saw that slew foot looking thing from Zadorov, not too surprising, honestly, that he wound up with a concussion after that one. It was pretty brutal. Nazem Kadri is day-to-day with a lower body injury. Zach Werenski is out at about 4 weeks with a shoulder injury. Mikko Koivu is day-to-day with a lower body injury. Kind of standard Koivu stuff. He's going to be out for some time, as he is every season. Jared Spurgeon is week-to-week with a lower body injury. We've got Mikhail Granlund day-to-day with a lower body injury. Craig Anderson is day-to-day with a lower body injury. Travis Konechny is day-to-day with an upper body injury. And Patrick Hornquist is out longer term with a lower body injury. Oh, we've actually got a couple more here. Andreas Johnsson is day-to-day with a lower body injury. And we've got Alexander Edler just moved to the IR, day-to-day with an upper body injury. Don't really know much beyond that. As far as people coming back, we've got Brian Rust, Jack Hughes, Andrei Burakovsky, Gabriel Landeskog, Dylan Strome, and Mitch Marner all making their returns. There were some other kind of injuries that happened midweek, especially flu-like, not injuries, but illnesses that kept people out of games, but they're not listed here. Typically, if something resolves itself within the same week, I don't bother mentioning it because it doesn't matter. And people that are still out long-term, guys like Patrice Bergeron and Nicholas Backstrom are not on this list because we've mentioned them in prior weeks. So this is just new injuries and updates. Okay, moving into drop candidates. I'll start with Gambies here. His first one is Jared McCann, center left wing, 36%. His ice time's been dropping a bit, and as a result, so have his peripheral numbers, which is his kind of draw. He's still got second line center, which is about as good a place as he can be, but it's just there's not a lot going on at that position at this point. Also, Pittsburgh plays all the heavy game nights coming up this week, which makes him an additional reason to drop him because odds are you're not going to be starting him. So yeah, that makes sense. Jonathan Quick is 33% owned, and we kind of just don't know why at this point. He's been very bad. The Kings can't win a game to save their lives. And I think sooner than later, we'll start seeing more games going to Jack Campbell, rather. But we'll see. It's to be seen. And honestly, I'm not sure how much difference it'll really make, as neither one of them has been particularly good. Although neither is a team in front of them, so how much can you blame them? And then the last one here, he's got Andrei Burakovsky, left wing, right wing, 50%. 50% is just too high ownership for this guy, especially considering he's no longer on that top power play and he's not going to be on the top line. He's still an okay hold for the beginning of this week, as Colorado's the only team with 3 off nights, but I think you can drop him come Saturday or earlier if you for some reason aren't benching players, and you can let him go. For my drop candidates, first one is Ryan Strome, center right wing, 52%. He's just cold now. He dropped off that top power play unit. I think we're going to start seeing this kind of be the new norm for him. He still has exposure to Artemi Panarin, but I'm not sure it's enough to make me want to hang on to him, and I'm not sure how long it's going to last. His peripherals have also dipped. He's not taking shots really at all anymore. He still plays a lot of minutes, but there's just not a lot to like. If he's not getting you points, he's not getting you much of anything, and that's what we're seeing now. And his power play points obviously are going to go away if he's not playing power play 1. My next one here is Josh Morrissey, who's actually been okay lately. I'm just kind of surprised that he's 56% owned. He's actually getting added more. He's another kind of defenseman that doesn't do anything except for give you points, and he's not really doing a lot in that respect either. The big draw for him would be a points-only league. If you're in a points league that needs categories, he just doesn't fill any categories. Or if you're in a Cats league, he doesn't really do much there either. So he still has that sort of power play 1, if you want to call it that. They're sort of still doing that 1A, 1B thing over there. but he's still got that exposure. So there is a little bit of something to like there, but it's just he doesn't really get enough of the time. And actually, it looks like Neil Pionk has been playing the majority of the time now as well, as they've shifted to a more stacked top line with Wheeler, Scheifele, Line A, and Kyle Connor, which is the line we saw last season, and Neil Pionk is the guy manning that, which means Morrissey's value drops even further. And then lastly, I got two more actually. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is another guy that I just think is too high owned. He's okay in block leagues, but beyond that, you're looking at a guy that is probably going to be due for another sub 40-point season with pretty bad power play points and decent hits, bad shots. He's just not that great. I especially really liked OEL coming into the season, as I expected Kessel to really help out on that power play one, but it just didn't really materialize. They haven't really been able to get a whole lot going regardless. And as a result, Ekman-Larsson is not benefiting from the emergence of Kessel the way I thought he would. So we're winding up seeing a player that's essentially the same one as we see every single season. It's going to depend league to league whether he's useful to you, but in most leagues he will not be, in my opinion. And then lastly here we have Nick Schmaltz, same team, center, left wing, right wing, 36%. We're basically back to what we had before, ice time wise. He's down to 12, 13 minutes, which is way, way, way too low. The difference is last time this happened, he was getting a ton of points for essentially no reason. And now it's happening again, and he has no points to show. No points, no peripherals. He's really awful to be holding on to, and he's only 36, and he's 36% owned, which is way too high. Also, the Coyotes have an awful schedule next week. Oh, their schedule opponents-wise is decent, but their schedule off-nights-wise is non-existent. They play all the heavy game nights, and next week is a tough one for heavy game nights. So even if you are holding him, you're going to wind up benching him all week, most likely anyway. Okay, let's move into long-term targets really quickly, and then we'll go into specific stuff for the coming week. First one here from Gamby's side is Victor Olofsson, left wing, right wing, 63%. Now, he was essentially listed in here, and he mentioned this to me as homework for everybody. Try to see what the cost for Olofsson is. This is not somebody you're going to be able to pick up from the waiver wire in most leagues, but he is a player that you might be able to acquire cheaply, and that's the key here. We want to be able to see if you can acquire Olofsson, what will it cost? If it's going to cost one of your weaker players, it's probably worth it because Olofsson is looking good rest of the season on something like 70-point pace, and even better over the last 30 days. He's been really, really good. Plus, his peripherals are decent, at least from a shot perspective. So, and he doesn't look like he'll be able to get bumped off that top power play unit anytime soon. Really liking Olofsson rest of the season. Next up, Dylan Strome, center, 31%. This is a player that we mentioned. If he gets to play with DeBrincat and Kane in top power play, he's going to be worth hanging on to. That's what we're seeing. And in standard Dylan Strome style, he's producing with those two, which makes sense. So as long as that's going on, Dylan Strome is worth ownership, especially in more than 31% of leagues. It seems a little low for him. But if he loses Kane or if he loses both of them, he starts to become droppable again. And then lastly here, we've got Calvin DeHaan, 13% on defense, same team near Chicago. He's for a banger league. He gets a lot of the bangos. He's got hits and blocks mostly. And his shot production is, it's not great, but for a guy that gets you those types of other peripherals, it's decent enough to warrant being held onto in certain leagues, especially if you have blocks. For my side, I've got Oliver Bjorkstrand here, left wing, right wing, 13%, shooting like an absolute madman, really making a case to keep that top right wing spot over Cam Atkinson. I don't know if he's a rest of season hold, but I really like him for the short to long term if he can keep this up. Next up, Sami Vatanen. Now, Sami Vatanen, at least last time I checked his ownership, it still is 6%. His ownership is 6%. In our leagues, which is a full banger league, which means PIMs, hits, blocks, and then also shots, power play points, goals, and assists, he is 97th by season average. That is really good for a defenseman. And that's when you couple that with the fact that he hasn't really gotten the opportunity to play on the power play all that much until recently, he's been playing a lot better recently. You look at the last 14 days, he's at 20th because he's shooting more. He's getting hits and blocks because of increased ice time. His PIMs are not great, but whatever. His power play point production and assists are good. He's playing very well. Even over the last 30 days, he's been looking very good. So I think his 6% ownership is just ridiculous. It should be much, much higher than that. I can't believe it, honestly. It doesn't make any sense to me. Another player that we've mentioned repeatedly on this show is Anthony Duclair, left wing, right wing, 14% owned. Why is he that low? I get that everybody likes John Gabriel Pageau more than what we're seeing from Duclair so far. But honestly, Duclair is, in my opinion, the better ad. Pageau's numbers are not representative of they're basically very unsustainable. So they look like pretty similar on paper. They're both goals first guys. In fact, Duclair has 13 goals and 6 assists to Pageau's 15 goals and 7 assists. So you can make the argument right away that Pageau is the better ad. They're very similar with that goal first attitude that they both have more than 2 goals to 1 assist. The problem is Pageau doesn't have the shots to back up his goal production, whereas Duclair does. Duclair's his shooting percentage is much more in line with something that's sustainable. I still think it's a little high. I think it's like 16 or 17%. But Pageau's is up around 20 plus, which is not going to sustain, especially considering hasn't been a goal scorer in his career anyway. And Pageau, if I were to think Pageau is going to be a long-term guy, I would see it via assists more than anything, which he's not getting. Duclair also is not getting much in the way of assists, but he's a shoot-first guy, so that's not totally surprising. I do expect more assists from both of them, honestly, but I expect Pageau's goal production to drop while I expect Duclair's to stay closer to the same rest of the season. 14%, considering Pageau's 73%, is just hilarious to me. And considering Pageau is center only and Duclair is left wing, right wing, I don't know why they're so far apart. All right, moving into the week preview, we've got a handful of teams that play 4 games this week. Vegas, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, LA, Minnesota, Tampa, Calgary, and Vancouver. Teams that play 2 or less games, there actually aren't any, which is a nice change. Teams that play 3 or more off days, Colorado only. There's a handful that play 2 off nights. I'll go ahead and jump through and look at them real quick. It would be Boston, Ottawa, the Caps, and that is it. Yikes. Not much. Oh, Vegas as well. So Vegas, Boston, Ottawa, Washington, and Philly, actually. So those teams are the ones that have 2 off nights, which is okay. I mean, it's about as good as it gets this week. And a bunch of them play Monday, Wednesday, which are Ottawa, the Caps, obviously the Avalanche, since they play 3 off nights, and Boston. So those are the teams you can target early and then switch off to another team like Vegas that plays Friday, Sunday to try to avoid Saturday. But in fact, Vegas is the only Friday, Sunday team this week. So trying to get a guy on Vegas is a good option. All right. Looking into pickups, we've got, Gamby's short term start with Anthony Duclair, which makes sense. I was considering putting him on both sides, but I usually don't do that. So I just gave him the long-term version. Left wing, right wing, 14%, as we already mentioned. He does get the first 2 off nights, Monday, Wednesday. So that's pretty handy. But, and then I actually would hold on to him even though he plays Saturday and you might not be able to play him. He still might be worth it over some of your other players, depending on what's going on. Next up, he put Braden McNabb, who I like a lot, actually. Defense, 18%. This is a peripheral defenseman. You're not adding him for his production because he's not going to have much. But in points leagues, especially if you count blocks, he has a high floor because he just always puts up decent peripherals. We actually added him in the Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patreon Fantasy League, as an ad for next week because he avoids that Saturday and he's a defenseman. So we were able to add him in. We basically gained 4 starts by adding him over Alex Galchenyuk, who plays all the heavy game nights. And, we weren't going to be able to play him anyway. So McNabb, great ad for us. Good ad for you, probably. And lastly here, if he's available, Jonas Donskoy, left wing, right wing, 45%. So about half the leagues you'll see him in. He's still currently at that top line, top power play, which makes him valuable regardless. But the 3 off nights are the real key thing here. If he gets bumped from top power play or top line or both, which could happen sometime this week, you can feel free to drop him probably after Friday. But as long as he's playing top line, top power play, he's going to have value. Then from my side of things, I also had Donskoy, so you can just go ahead and skip him. Then I have Charlie Coyle here, center right wing, 15%. Charlie Coyle, right? So he's only really valuable while Krejci's out. But he plays Monday, Wednesday. So you can drop him on Thursday if you want to for somebody like my next one here, Alex Tuck. I'll get into him in a second. But Coyle's playing second line, which is not so good. At first, he was playing with Marchand on that second line, but now he's playing with DeBrusk and Heinen, which isn't fantastic. But he does get top power play exposure, and it's hard to find players that are worth adding that play Monday, Wednesday this week. At 15%, he's pretty widely available, and his peripherals have been decent since getting this kind of increase in role with Bergeron out. So he's all right. He gets you hits, he gets you some shots, and he's playing a lot of minutes. So there's a decent amount to like with him. Then lastly here, Alex Tuck, as I already hinted, left wing, right wing, 20%. This is if nobody else on Vegas is available, but he's been pretty good lately. He gets decent minutes, well, okay minutes for a third liner, and good shot production. He also has that top power play. I mean, if you want to call it that, on Vegas. He's been, pretty red hot lately with 7 points in his last 4 games. I'm not really taking too much of that into effect because I don't like looking at hot hands as that's the reason you should pick somebody up. I like deployment because that's usually more sustainable. So his deployment's okay, but the fact that he's got good power play time and that he's been shooting a lot is what I'm liking here. And the fact that he's got the Friday, Sunday, which, as I mentioned, is extremely hard to come by and is one of the reasons, if nothing else, to hang on to him next week, or at least try to add him on Friday if you don't get him before that. And that is it. We're going to have the Unsustainable Wednesdays episode coming out on Tuesday, which is a little, well, it's not Wednesday, is it? So that's going to go out early so that Gamby can leave and try to get to the West Coast in a reasonable amount of time. After that, so this coming week might be a little weird. We may not have a weekend preview. If we do, it might just be me by myself, which is great, right? But I think I will be doing the weekend Saturday live stream solo, but it will happen. So check that out on YouTube if you haven't already. There's links posted in Discord every time we're about to do it. We post links to Twitter at Fantasy Hockey PD. Go to fantasyhockeypodcast.com to check out all the tools and different places you can have to connect with us. Discord being the one that we mention the most because it's the most engaging, and there's a lot of like-minded fantasy hockey fans there. 1,300 plus members in there now, and everything that we do gets posted there first. Episodes come out, they get posted there first. Tools come out, they're posted there first. Discord is where you should be, for sure. And then beyond that, we plan on doing a mid-season draft with Patreons. So for our Patreon, essentially what we do with Patreon is you get a little bit of additional access to us. You get to listen live. And we get a couple of channels in Discord that are private to patrons only, and the listener leagues, of course. But because listener leagues have already started, I understand there's not a whole lot of kind of upside to the Patreonship, and we did that by design, honestly. If you want to support us, we really want to do it. We would really prefer you do it because you enjoy what we put out. We don't want to paywall anything really beyond like leagues, because if we didn't, it would be madness. It'd just be too much going on for us to maintain. So that's kind of the only thing that we quote unquote paywall is the ability to play actual leagues with us. Just from a volume perspective, it would be too much. But if you want to be part of these mid-season drafts where we will be able to look back at what we've done before and kind of address things, see how the draft has changed, and kind of it'll be a way to reevaluate players instead of just using their draft position at the beginning of the season to figure out where players are actually worth. So that should be fun. Will be most likely Patreon only. And then beyond that, I think that's it. I think we covered all the bases. Check us out on YouTube. If you look up Fantasy Hockey Podcast on YouTube, you'll find us. We're there. Everything gets posted there. A lot of the episodes, if you haven't been there yet, have a little bit of extra oomph there. Unsustainable Wednesdays has video with us actually in it, our faces and stuff, and some helpful little tidbits that go on if you are actually willing to watch the video as opposed to just listen to audio. And that covers everything, I think. Yes, it does. Okay. This is Brandon. Gamby will be with me for Wednesday, and then we'll see him next week. And thank you for listening.